Okay, it's time for another pile review. Let me fix my mic 1 second. All right, today's board is Ace Queen Jack. Pretty interesting board. Go over ranges again. This is an under the gun 15% opening range, and then a 12% button flattening range. It's pretty condensed. Again, it'll have hands like Ace King, Queens, Jacks that I'm not necessarily flatting, but population does. So might as well include them at some frequency. We're treating it as an under the gun 3x, button flat, both the blinds fold, so the pot is 7.5 big blinds, no rake, and we're 100 blinds deep. And then each player has a 1/3 pot, 3/4 pot, and 150% pot bet size on each street with a 75% pot raise size, as well as an all-in on every street. So let's get into Ace Queen Jack Rainbow. This makes sense to me as being better for the opposition player, as pretty much everything they open is going to connect with this, right? They have aces, queens, jacks, ace, queen, queen, jack, ace, jack, king 10, king, queen, king. Like they flop a pair almost always. And we can see that their equity is 63% of the pot, right? And their EV is pretty much about that as well. So they don't really struggle to realize their equity as much as other boards. And with that, we are betting a third pot about 60% of the time. We're still checking somewhat frequently. I would guess to kind of protect hands like 9s and 8s and our weak aces, that kind of thing. And I don't expect to see many raises from in position. I feel like when I c-bet this board with a hand like ace king or queen jack and I get raised, that it literally cannot be anything but the nuts, right? It seems suicidal for me to c-bet queen jack on this board and get raised by ace 10, right, or 10-9. That seems really tough to happen. But that said, bad players do bad things, and that's why they're bad. So it makes sense to me that those types of hands will still bet. Those hands that are still strong, but kind of vulnerable, right? Like a king or a 10 puts a 1 card straight out there that our opponent can definitely have, although we have more. Hands like ace king can get value from hands like ace 10 or wheel aces that will probably feel obligated to call a small bet. All of our sets probably want to bet for the same reasons. They're strong, but there are some turn cards that are bad. I am surprised to see hands like king queen betting, hands like jack 10 betting, hands like my assumption is that hands like 6s and 7s will become our bluffs, and that's why they're betting. And as mentioned, these weaker aces bet or check depending on certain things, and as normal, they bet more with a backdoor flush draw, just higher equity, that kind of stuff. So that makes sense. Opponent's response, again, my Pio is bugged for some reason. It does have some raises, mostly from its strongest 2 pairs, almost never from sets, and hands like queen 10 and jack 10 and pocket 10s. So my thought, and maybe this will be a reasonable node block for this board, I haven't node blocked any of it, is that I am not getting check raised by a hand like queen 10, right? I don't think many players are looking at a board as good as it is for out of position and saying, I'm the in position player, I need to have some bluffs so that I can get value from king 10 when I have it, and I'm going to start raising hands like queen 10 suited in position. I just don't think that's happening. That said, I haven't gone through PT4. I haven't done anywhere. This is just my gut feeling that players are not, at my level, they are not taking a hand like queen 10 or jack 10 and turning it into a bluff, or pocket 10 and turning it into a bluff, right? That said, as a player studying, maybe against regs at our level, they'll probably have the same read, they'll have the same feeling, and we can start doing that and kind of making them feel really gross when they see bet ace king, and we check raise, or not check raise, raise in position with pocket 10s, and then we just kind of overbet, and just make the life hell. But that said, the reason I don't feel comfortable doing that is because what an annoying and like ballsy check raise this is when out of position has aces, queens, jacks, ace, queen, ace, jack. Just like all of the good hands. And one of the things that I guess I mentioned like 5 minutes ago is that I feel like we're only getting raised in position by the stone nuts. And so maybe there's some leveling war here. And it seems like the solver is saying like you do raise king 10, you raise ace queen, but also you need to, your bluffs will become hands with a 10 in them. Just as a way to, you have that blocker effect, and that's just your way of balancing. I'm not good enough to do that right now. Maybe I'll start doing that in the future and just kind of nutting up. But it doesn't do that all the time. Honestly, like 25% of the time. Blocking the hands with backdoor flush draws. So not doing this as often with a spade. But most hands with a pair and a gut shot are continues. So like queen 9, jack 9, 10 8, 10 9, jack 10, they're continuing 100% of the time. Only sometimes we will raise. So let's do a call and let's see how turns play out. Interestingly enough, like the king or the 10 is actually like an insanely good card for out-of-position's equity. I guess we're just betting a lot of like, since we're betting all of our king queens on this line, we're betting all of our ace kings. We're betting king 10, king jack type hands. Like that makes sense that since we have those hands, well, that's a good card for us. I wonder how it changes our EV. Wow, it just absolutely slaughters it. I'm not really sure why a 2, 3, or a 4 is worse than a 5. I mean, like maybe it's something with the density of wheel aces that we have. I'm not sure. But it's interesting to note just how good the 10 is for us. Putting up that king-specific 4 to a straight is very good because I guess we just have all the kings, and they don't. Actually, if I go back to the flop, are we even c-betting king? King? Love this pile bug. A third of the time, we're c-betting. 40% of the time, we're c-betting king. So, okay, we have all the straights. Interesting thing to look at here is the sizing we're taking now. Okay, so I've clicked the wrong stuff. Yada yada. Bet call. Strategy. Again, the sizing we're taking is mixed. Everything is fine. I'm interested to see what like overbets become. Hands with a 10 in them makes a lot of sense. Hands with a king in them make a lot of sense. Sets make a lot of sense. And so I guess, the idea is that we're getting raised a lot by king 10, and so when we don't get raised, like they're kind of king 10 capped. That probably changes if we like set them to flat 100% of king 10, which might not be happening, or a higher frequency of king 10, which I don't really know how that's going to play out. But it makes sense. These hands like queen jack bet smaller. That makes sense to me. Hands like ace king, still betting small though. That makes sense to me. Hands like king queen, ace 10. That just kind of like, I guess I call. Yeah, I can dig it. I would imagine on the turn there's like no raises. I guess king 10 if you still have it. Deuces, sure. And then, I mean, I don't know if the river makes a lot of difference here. In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. I'm going to start loading up the two-tone version. But I think this is just an interesting board that, in my mind, and equity-wise, just favors out of position so much that it's really tough for betting to be bad. But it does seem like a lot of bad things happen because of just how condensed the broadways in position can be. When there's 3 broadways out there, like both players get a piece pretty often, and there's a lot of like nut hands versus like nut straight versus set type hands. But that said, two-tone board. Again, 62% equity, still very high, 45.9 EV. still very high. Not much is changing here. So when we see about a third, we're again getting raised almost always by king 10. Interestingly enough, king 10 of diamonds is raising less frequently. It just feels like it has the board just completely locked down, which makes sense. Hands like jack 10, however, are the ones raising. You're doing so. Your bluffs seem to be equity driven, right? And jack 10 raising on this board is clearly a bluff, right? We don't think a pair of jacks here is for value, but it has a ton of equity. We want to build the pot. It's very good. And so you can see here also 10-8 with a backdoor flush draw or with the flush draw are going to raise more often than 10-8 without. Yeah, and so this will be interesting. I think, again, what's probably going to happen is just that diamonds aren't that bad for out of position. Okay, that's slightly worse, significantly worse. This is way worse than I was expecting, because I think on the last board I did like ace jack 5. It wasn't that bad, but now I guess we just like with the jack being out. I mean, maybe we just don't have enough flushes on 3 Broadway boards as opposed to 2 Broadway boards. Maybe that's how this works, and maybe that's an adjustment to notice that the more Broadways out there, the worse it gets for our range because all of our flushes are going to have Broadways in them, right? So we just have less flush combos, which is cool to note. So let's go to the monotone board. Take a look. My assumption is that we're going to see a lot more of the same, in that it's going to be good for out of position. Okay, this is a pretty 5% worse, a few chips worse. These Broadways without a diamond are really going to suffer. We start to check more often. Okay. So my main takeaway so far is mostly on the flop, in that when ranges are so narrow, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of the under the gun player, the more Broadways, the worse for us, because a lot of our flushes are going to be completely Broadway based, right? We're going to be opening suited Broadways and not a lot of other suited cards, right? And we're going to be opening suited aces, and all of that is pretty much covered on ace queen jack, right? We can't have king jack of diamonds. We can have flop the royal. We can have flop 10-9 of diamonds. We might have on this board 4 flush combos, and that's it. One of which is a royal, and so we can be drawing dead. I mean, pretty much to a board pair, very frequently. But if neither player has a diamond, then this is just totally irrelevant, right? And neither player really has that many offsuit hands. And it kind of leans towards the pre-flop guy because he has all the ace-king offsuits, ace-queen offsuits. But all of those high diamonds are out too, right? Like ace-queen, ace-jack with 1 diamond, they're all gone as well. So we don't have a lot of redraws either to diamonds, which is interesting. That's a new dynamic. So let's play this out. Again, king 10, if you flop the royal, you're not going to raise. Mostly calling. Sure, it makes sense. Let's take a look at runouts. Yeah, I mean, this seems to be going along with the theme that the more Broadways, we just have less flushes. Even if it puts a 1-card flush out there, a lot of our 1 diamond hands are going to have a queen, jack, or an ace in them, right? And they're just not there. And now it's in position, just kind of swoops in there and takes our equity. So yeah, I mean I feel like this board wasn't. I didn't have as much to discuss about this board in particular. But I think I'm noticing a pattern that's important, and that is the Broadway density or something. I don't know. That sounds way too complex of a name. But the more Broadway cards there are, the less flush combos we end up having, and especially the less one diamond flush combos we end up having, as opposed to ace 7-4 or ace jack 5. So yeah, that is ace queen jack.